Nyla Abernathy carefully sat down on the sofa, placing her hand on her huge belly. The last weeks of her pregnancy had been particularly difficult for her. August in Harrisville was unusually hot, and even the fan humming loudly in the corner of the small living room did not save her from the stuffiness. "Just a little longer, baby," she whispered, stroking her belly. "Soon we'll finally see each other." Their modest two-room apartment on the first floor of an old building seemed even smaller because of the children's things scattered everywhere. Nyla had spent the last few weeks preparing for the baby's arrival, carefully laying out tiny undershirts and diapers. Terrell had helped assemble the crib at first, but then he gave up and left. "I'll finish it myself," he had muttered. And so the crib stood unassembled in the corner of the bedroom. Nyla glanced at her watch. 5 in the evening. Terrell should have been back from the construction site an hour ago. She sighed. Lately, he had often been late, coming home tired and silent, and sometimes smelling of cheap whiskey. Nyla tried not to reproach him. Construction work was hard, especially in such heat, and money was always tight. 3 years ago, they had dreamed of a big, bright house with a garden where their children would grow up. Nyla believed that Terrell would finish his evening classes and become a foreman, and she might open a small cafe. But dreams remained just dreams. Terrell dropped out of the courses, and Nyla continued to work as a waitress in a diner until she went on maternity leave. The front door slammed loudly, making Nyla jump. "Terry?" she called. She heard heavy breathing and shuffling feet in the hallway. A minute later, Terrell appeared in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, but with a gaunt face and reddened eyes. Another figure loomed behind him. "I brought Lamont," Terrell said curtly as he walked into the room. "We need some cold water." Nyla tried to get up, but Lamont stopped her with a gesture. Sit down. I'll find it myself," he said with a smile. "How are you, Nyla? Is it soon?" 10 days left, she replied, trying to smile back. "At least that's what the doctor says." Lamont nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Nyla looked at her husband. Terrell sank heavily into the chair opposite her and closed his eyes. "Hard day?" she asked. "As usual," he replied without opening his eyes. "The foreman was yelling again that we're working too slowly. It's hot as hell, and he wants us to work like robots." Nyla wanted to say something encouraging, but at that moment Lamont returned with 2 glasses of water. He handed one to Terrell and placed the other on the coffee table next to Nyla. "I brought you one too," he said. "You need to drink more water in this weather, especially in your condition." "Thank you," Nyla smiled gratefully. Lamont was always attentive. A friend of Terrell's since school, he worked with him on the same construction site and often visited their home. Lately, even too often, as Nyla thought. Terrell, on the one hand, was glad to have his friend's company, but on the other, he sometimes gave him strange looks, as if he suspected something. "Well, old man, you're about to become a father." Lamont patted Terrell on the shoulder, sitting down on the armrest of his chair. "Are you ready?" "What can you do?" Terrell grunted. "I just hope it's a son. I'll teach him everything I didn't have time to learn myself." "It doesn't matter who's born, as long as they're healthy," Nyla remarked. Terrell gave her a disapproving look. "Of course, healthy. That goes without saying. But a son is a different matter, continuing the family line and all that." Nyla grimaced. They had discussed this many times before, and each time the conversation ended in an argument. Terrell was obsessed with the idea that he should have a son, an heir, while Nyla believed that any child should be loved regardless of gender. "Be that as it may, I'm sure the child will be handsome," Lamont said, clearly trying to defuse the situation. With a mother like that. Nyla blushed, and Terrell shot his friend a quick, wary glance. "I'll go make something to eat," Nyla said, struggling to get up from the sofa. "Sit down, I'll do it," Terrell said unexpectedly, getting up. Nyla looked at her husband in surprise. He usually didn't care about household chores. "But you're tired." "It's okay, I can handle it," he snapped. "Talk to Lamont for now. He hasn't seen you in a long time." Terrell went into the kitchen, leaving Nyla alone with Lamont. An awkward silence hung in the air. "How's your back?" Lamont finally asked. "You said it's been hurting lately." Better, thank you, Nyla replied, surprised that he remembered her complaints. Terrell never asked about her health. Lamont smiled his gentle smile, which made dimples appear on his cheeks. If you need anything, just let me know. I'm always here to help. Nyla nodded, lowering her eyes. She felt awkward when Lamont showed such concern. It was nice, but at the same time strange, as if something was wrong, forbidden. There was a crash from the kitchen as a pot fell and Terrell cursed. Lamont jumped up. I'll go help your husband before he breaks everything in there. When they both disappeared into the kitchen, Nyla breathed a sigh of relief. The tension that always arose when the three of them were in the same room was almost palpable. She listened to the men's conversation. I'm telling you, old man, don't worry so much. Lamont's voice came from the kitchen. Children are a blessing, whether they're sons or daughters. That's easy for you to say. You don't have any, Terrell replied irritably. But I have nieces, and I adore them. Besides, I've always dreamed of having a big family. Then why are you still single? Terrell asked defiantly. There was a pause. Then Lamont replied quietly, so that Nyla could barely hear him. It didn't work out. Not with that woman. The evening passed in a tense atmosphere. Lamont tried to joke, telling stories from the construction site, but Terrell remained gloomy and silent. When they sat down to dinner, Nyla noticed how her husband watched Lamont's every move, frowning when he addressed her. After dinner, Lamont got ready to go home. Thanks for dinner, Nyla. You're a great cook, he said, standing in the doorway. Terrell, see you tomorrow at the construction site. Don't be late, or the foreman will be furious again. When the door closed behind Lamont, Terrell turned sharply to his wife. What's going on between you two? Nayla looked at her husband in confusion. What are you talking about? Don't pretend. I see how he looks at you, and how you smile at him. Terrell, what nonsense are you talking about? Nayla tried to speak calmly, even though her heart was beating faster. Lamont is your friend. He's just being polite to me. Polite? Terrell smiled bitterly. He's devouring you with his eyes. And you're no better. Stop it. Nyla pressed her hands to her stomach, as if protecting the child from this quarrel. I'm pregnant with your child. How can you say such things? Terrell looked at her with a long, heavy gaze, then suddenly deflated and rubbed his face wearily. I'm sorry. I'm tired. And this heat. Okay, forget what I said. He went into the bedroom, leaving Nyla alone with a heavy feeling in her chest. It wasn't the first scene like this. Terrell was becoming more and more suspicious, his jealousy more and more irrational. Nyla didn't know what to do, how to convince him that there was nothing between her and Lamont. But was she being completely honest with herself? That night, Nyla lay awake for a long time, listening to her husband's heavy breathing. And then the pain came, sharp, piercing her stomach. Contractions. Terrell! She called, gritting her teeth against the pain. Terrell, wake up! I think it's starting. The next few hours merged into a kaleidoscope of pain, screams, and bright white hospital walls for Nyla. Terrell drove her to the maternity ward, nervously smoking at the entrance while she was examined, and then told to wait in the hallway. Everything will be fine, was the last thing Nyla heard before she was taken to the delivery room. The labor was long and difficult. Nyla screamed, cursed everyone and everything, and then suddenly heard a new cry, piercing, demanding, the cry of her child. Congratulations, you have a boy. The midwife smiled, showing Nyla a small, wrinkled bundle. A healthy, strong baby. A son. She had given birth to a son. Terrell would be happy. After she was transferred to the ward, Nurse Yasmin came in, short, with lively eyes and neatly tied black hair. Nyla, she exclaimed when she saw the patient. I didn't know you were admitted today. They had known each other since school, although they had never been close friends. But in Little Harrisville, everyone knew each other in one way or another. Hi, Yasmin, Nyla smiled weakly. I'm glad you're here. You're having a boy, right? Congratulations. Yasmin checked the IV. What are you going to name him? We haven't decided yet, Nyla admitted. Terrell wanted Devon, but I like Jamal. Both names are nice. Yasmin nodded. How's Terrell? Is he here? Yes, somewhere in the hallway. Can I call him? Yasmin nodded and left the room. A few minutes later, the door opened and Terrell entered. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, but when he saw Nyla with the baby in her arms, his face lit up. A son? He asked, cautiously approaching the bed. Nyla nodded, smiling through her tears. Yes, Terry. We have a boy. Terrell gently touched the baby's tiny hand, and the child grabbed his finger tightly. He's strong, Terrell whispered, and Nyla was surprised to see tears in his eyes. He'll have a good grip. At that moment, all their arguments, all their problems seemed distant and unimportant. They were simply a family, mother, father, and their newborn son. Terrell stayed with them for several hours, awkwardly holding the baby when Nyla insisted he take their son in his arms, reverently examining the tiny fingers. He looks like you, he said to Nyla, and there was something strange in his voice, either pride or doubt. Nyla wanted to argue, to say that all newborns look alike, but she remained silent. She was too exhausted from childbirth to argue. When Terrell was about to leave, he looked confused, as if he didn't know what to do next. I'll come tomorrow, he said, standing in the doorway. I'll bring you something. What do you usually need after giving birth? I don't need anything. Nyla smiled wearily. Just come. Terrell nodded, took another look at his son sleeping in his crib, and left. Yasmin, who had returned to check on the patient, shook her head. Men are so funny with newborns. They always look like they're afraid of breaking something. Nyla smiled weakly, feeling sleep overcome her. The last day had exhausted her. Yasmin? She called to the nurse at the door. If anyone calls, will you tell them I'm asleep? Yasmin looked at her intently. Of course, you need to rest. Left alone, Nyla closed her eyes. She knew Lamont would call as soon as he found out about the birth, and she wasn't ready to talk to him. Not now, when she had just seen how happy Terrell was, holding his son in his arms. A son who might not be his. Terrell Abernathy woke up with a pounding headache. Yesterday, after returning from the maternity hospital, he had drunk some whiskey, either to celebrate the birth of his son or to drown out his anxious thoughts. Son. He had a son. The thought still seemed unreal. He looked at his watch. 10 in the morning. He should call the construction site and let them know he wouldn't be coming in today. But Terrell decided the foreman would understand. He reached for his phone and saw several missed calls from Lamont. Terrell grimaced. He didn't want to talk to his friend right now, didn't want to hear his congratulations. Something unpleasant and heavy settled in his chest when he thought of Lamont and Nyla. After showering and changing, Terrell got ready to go to the hospital. He stood in front of the flower shop for a long time, wondering what flowers to buy for Nyla. In the end, he chose a small bouquet of white lilies. He knew his wife loved them for their delicate scent. He also bought a small plush monkey for his son. The Harrisville Maternity Hospital was a 3-story red brick building on the outskirts of town. Nothing special, just a typical local hospital, but the only one in their small town. At the entrance, Terrell ran into Yasmin, who was just finishing her shift. "Oh, Terrell," she exclaimed when she saw him. "Are you here to see Nyla? She's in room 104, second floor. She looks great, and so does the baby. He's a real strapping lad." Terrell nodded, not knowing what to say. He always felt awkward around Yasmin. She was too energetic, too talkative. "Thanks," he finally managed. Are you finishing work?" "Yes, I had the night shift." Yasmin yawned. "I'm exhausted, but Nyla asked me to bring her something when I leave. Do you want to go up with me?" Terrell nodded in agreement, and they entered the elevator together. "Nyla said you haven't chosen a name for the baby yet," Yasmin continued to chatter. "But I'm sure you'll come up with something special." Terrell listened distractedly to her chatter. His thoughts were far away. He imagined teaching his son to play basketball, taking him fishing, telling him one day about his father, whom he himself barely remembered. The thought of fatherhood both frightened and inspired him. The elevator stopped on the second floor, and they stepped out into a bright hallway with a row of doors on both sides. 104. It's at the end, Yasmin pointed. I'll be right there. I just need to grab something for Nyla from the doctor's office. Terrell nodded and headed for the indicated room. Stopping in front of the door, he took a deep breath, trying to calm his suddenly racing heart. What was wrong with him? It was just a visit to his wife and newborn son. Why was he so nervous? Finally, gathering his courage, he knocked and, without waiting for a response, opened the door. Nyla was sitting on the bed, leaning against the pillows. She looked tired but happy. Her gaze was fixed on the small crib standing nearby. Hearing the door creak, she turned her head and smiled. "Terry, you came." Terrell stepped into the room and froze. On the bedside table was a bouquet of red roses, no less than a dozen large, bright flowers in a crystal vase. Terrell blinked, not believing his eyes. He hadn't brought these roses. Then who had? "Hi." He forced himself to smile as he approached his wife. "How are you? How's the baby?" "We're fine," Nyla replied, taking the white lilies from his hands. "Oh, Terry, they're beautiful. Thank you." Her gaze darted to the roses for a moment, and Terrell noticed her shoulders tense. "What are these?" he asked as casually as possible, nodding toward the red flowers. Nyla paled slightly. "Oh, those. The nurses brought them, to congratulate us on the birth of our son." "The nurses?" Terrell repeated, feeling a wave of anger rising inside him. "I didn't know nurses gave such expensive bouquets." "Well, they probably chipped in," Nyla muttered, looking away. "It doesn't matter, Terry. Look at our son. He looks so much like you." But Terrell couldn't just let it go. Something about those roses, about Nyla's reaction, bothered him. He walked over to the nightstand and examined the bouquet closely. No card, no message, just flowers. "Beautiful roses," he said, turning to Nyla. "It's strange that I've never seen you like them. You always said you preferred lilies." Nyla pressed the bouquet to her chest, as if protecting herself. "Yes, I like lilies better, but roses are beautiful too." "Terry, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting so strange?" "I'm acting strange?" Terrell felt his voice rise. "I come to visit my wife and newborn son and see a bouquet of roses that, as it turns out, were given by some unknown nurses. And you ask me what's wrong with me." "Please don't yell," Nyla asked, glancing anxiously at the crib with the baby. "You'll wake him up." Terrell took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe the roses really were from the nurses. "Okay, I'm sorry," he said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" Nyla smiled with relief, seeing that the storm had passed. "Tired, but happy. The doctor said everything went well, no complications, and the baby is healthy." Terrell nodded, looking at his sleeping son. The tiny face, wrinkled and red, seemed familiar and foreign at the same time. The baby was so similar to all the newborns Terrell had ever seen, and yet, something in his features made Terrell feel strangely uneasy. "He has your nose," Nyla said, noticing his intense gaze. "Do you think so?" Terrell asked, unsure if he saw any resemblance. "Of course." Nyla touched his hand. "And your chin, too. He'll be a carbon copy of you, you'll see." Terrell wanted to believe her. He wanted to so badly. But something prevented him from fully accepting her words. At that moment, a cell phone rang. Nyla flinched and quickly grabbed the phone from the nightstand. "I have to answer this," she said, avoiding her husband's gaze. It's probably my mom." But Terrell had already noticed the name on the screen. Lamont. Why was Lamont calling his wife? And why was Nyla lying about it? "It's not your mother," he said, feeling a wave of anger rise within him again. "It's Lamont. Why is he calling you, Nyla?" The phone continued to ring. Nyla seemed frozen, not knowing what to do. "Answer it," Terrell insisted. "Answer it and put it on speaker. I want to hear what my best friend has to say to my wife." "Terry, don't," Nyla began, but the phone had already stopped ringing. "See, it's over. It doesn't matter." "It matters a lot." Terrell objected, raising his voice. Why is Lamont calling you? And why did you lie to me? Nyla lowered her eyes. He just wanted to know how the delivery went. He's your friend. He's interested. Then why didn't he call me? Terrell stood up, towering over the bed. He has my number. If he's so interested, why not ask me? I don't know, Terry. Nyla looked frightened. Maybe he tried, but couldn't get through? Terrell remembered the missed calls from Lamont on his phone. Yes, his friend had indeed tried to contact him, but that didn't explain the roses. And the roses, he said, pointing to the bouquet. Are the roses from him too? Nyla paled even more. No, I told you, they're from the nurses. Don't lie to me, Terrell shouted, unable to hold back any longer. I can see you're lying. Those damn roses are from Lamont, aren't they? Was he here? Did he come to see you? At that moment, Nyla's phone rang again. Once more, Lamont's name appeared on the screen. Terrell snatched the phone from his wife's hands and pressed the answer button. Lamont, he said, trying to sound calm. This is Terrell. Why are you calling my wife? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Terry? Lamont finally said. Hi, old man. I just wanted to see how Nyla and the baby were doing. And you decided to ask her instead of me? Terrell asked, feeling his voice tremble with suppressed rage. I called you, but you didn't answer, Lamont replied. He spoke calmly, but Terrell could hear the tension in his voice. I was worried. We're friends, Terry. I'm just concerned about you. Us? Or just Nyla? Terrell turned to his wife, who was sitting huddled on the bed. And the roses were from you too? The red roses in my room? What roses? Lamont asked, but Terrell heard something insincere, something false in his voice. Don't pretend. You sent Nyla a bouquet of red roses. Why, Lamont? Why are you sending flowers to my wife? Terrell, please, Nyla whispered, reaching for the phone. But Terrell wasn't listening. All the pieces of the puzzle suddenly fell into place in his head. Nyla and Lamont's strange behavior over the past few months, their looks, their conversations. The roses his friend had sent his wife. And the child, his son, who might not be his son at all. How long has this been going on? He asked, looking Nyla straight in the eye. How long have you been sleeping together? What? Nyla looked shocked. Terrell, what are you talking about? There's nothing between Lamont and me. Don't lie to me, Terrell yelled. And at that moment, the newborn woke up and started crying. I can see everything. You're sleeping with my best friend and this child is probably his. Terrell, calm down. Lamont's voice sounded alarmed on the phone. You're talking nonsense. Nyla is your wife and she loves you, and the child is yours without a doubt. Then why the roses? Terrell felt himself shaking with rage. Why did you send her red roses? There was silence on the phone. Then Lamont sighed. Okay, yes, the roses were from me. But it was just a congratulation on the birth of the baby, Terrell. Nothing more. Liar! Terrell shouted. I know there's something between you two. I can see the way you look at each other. I'm not blind. There was a rapid patter of footsteps in the hallway, and the door to the room opened. Yasmin stood in the doorway, a bag in her hands. What's going on here? She asked, looking from the shouting Terrell to the frightened Nyla and the crying baby. Quiet down. You're in a hospital. Get out, Terrell hissed through clenched teeth. This is none of your business. No, I won't, Yasmin said firmly, stepping into the room. You're scaring Nyla and the baby. If you don't calm down, I'll call security. Terrell ignored her, turning back to the phone. Lamont, tell me the truth. Did you sleep with my wife? Is this child yours? Terrell, stop it! Nyla shouted, trying to reach the crying baby. You're crazy. Of course the baby is yours. Terrell, I swear, there was nothing between Nyla and me, Lamont said. I would never do that to you. We're friends. But Terrell wasn't listening anymore. He looked at his wife, at her frightened face, at the bouquet of red roses, and felt a wave of rage rise up inside him like he had never felt before. You're lying, he said quietly. You're both lying. He reached into his jacket pocket and felt for the gun, an old revolver he had inherited from his father. Terrell always carried it with him when he came home late from the construction site through rough neighborhoods. Terrell. Yasmin must have noticed his movement, because her voice suddenly changed. What are you doing? Tell me the truth, Nyla. Terrell pulled out the gun and pointed it at his wife. Did you sleep with Lamont? Is this child his? Nyla screamed, covering the crib with her body. Yasmin rushed to the door, screaming for help. Lamont was shouting something on the phone, but Terrell couldn't make out the words. Last chance, Nyla, he said, cocking the hammer. Tell me the truth. Terrell, please, Nyla sobbed. The baby is yours, I swear. Don't do this. What about the roses? Terrell asked. Why did Lamont send you red roses? Nyla glanced at the bouquet, and something flashed in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? It's just a congratulation, she whispered. Nothing more. But Terrell saw the truth in her eyes. She was lying. She had been lying all along. I'm sorry, he said. And at that moment, a shot rang out in the room. The sound was deafening in the small hospital room. Nyla fell onto the bed, a red stain spreading across her white hospital gown. The baby was screaming, Yasmin was screaming, and alarmed voices echoed in the hallway. Terrell stood staring at his hand holding the gun, as if he didn't understand what had happened. Then he slowly lowered the weapon. I didn't mean to, he whispered, looking at his wife's motionless body. I didn't mean to. The door to the room burst open and 2 security guards rushed in. When they saw Terrell with the gun, they stopped. Drop the gun, one of them shouted. Drop the gun and raise your hands. Terrell obediently unclenched his fingers, and the gun fell to the floor with a thud. He did not resist when the guards twisted his arms behind his back. Chaos reigned in the ward. Doctors and nurses rushed to Nyla. Someone took the crying baby. Someone called the police. Terrell was taken out into the hallway and sat on a chair under the supervision of a security guard. He sat there motionless, staring at one spot when the police arrived. A young patrol officer read him his rights, handcuffed him, and led him out of the hospital amid the whispers and stares of staff and visitors. At the police station, Terrell was placed in an interrogation room, a small room with bare walls and a metal table in the middle. He sat there without saying a word when the door opened and a woman entered. She was tall, with short curly hair and piercing eyes. Dressed in a strict suit, she looked composed and professional. Mr. Abernathy, she said, sitting down across from him. I'm Detective Imani Ochieng. I'll be handling your case. Terrell looked at her silently. Do you understand what you're being charged with? Detective Ochieng asked. Terrell nodded slowly. I shot my wife, he said in a lifeless voice. Why? Asked the detective, watching his reaction closely. Terrell looked her straight in the eye. She lied to me. They both lied. Who else? Imani clarified. Lamont, my best friend. Terrell smiled bitterly. My former best friend. What did they lie to you about? The detective took notes in her notebook. Terrell clenched his fists. They slept together. The baby is his, not mine. I know it. Do you have proof? Imani asked. Terrell shook his head. Roses, he said. Red roses. He sent her red roses. And that made you think your wife was cheating on you? Not just the roses, Terrell objected. I saw the way they looked at each other. I could feel it. And then the roses. And her lies. She said the roses were from the nurses, but that wasn't true. Imani continued to take notes. Mr. Abernathy, your wife is dead. She died on the operating table half an hour ago. You shot the mother of your newborn son. And all because of a bouquet of roses? Terrell stared at her, unable to believe his ears. Nyla was dead? He had actually killed her? I didn't mean to, he whispered. I just wanted the truth. Now you'll have plenty of time to think about the truth, Imani said, closing her notebook. And the price you paid for it. She stood up to leave, but Terrell stopped her with a question. My son, is he okay? Imani turned around, and something like regret flashed in her eyes. The child is fine. He will remain in the hospital until social services decides what to do with him. Terrell lowered his head. Only now did it begin to sink in what he had done. He had killed the mother of his child. He had left his son an orphan, and all because of a bouquet of red roses. "Can I ask you one more question?" he asked as the detective stood at the door. "Yes," Imani replied. Can you check whose child it is? Mine or Lamont's?" Imani looked at him with a long, appraising gaze. "We'll run all the necessary tests as part of the investigation," she said finally. "But whatever the truth is, Mr. Abernathy, it won't bring your wife back or undo what you've done." With that, she left, leaving Terrell alone in the cold interrogation room. He sat there with his head in his hands, thinking about red roses, lies, and the truth that had cost his wife her life, and about the son who might not be his son at all. Detective Imani Ochieng stood in the middle of the hospital room where the murder had taken place just yesterday. Forensic lab technicians were finishing collecting evidence, photographing bloodstains on the bed, and marking the location of the bullet extracted from the wall. "So, what do we have?" Imani asked the young officer who was the first to arrive at the scene. "The victim is Nyla Abernathy, 30 years old, who died from a gunshot wound to the chest. She was shot by her husband, Terrell Abernathy, 35 years old, in front of nurse Yasmin Kadiri. The couple had a newborn baby boy, born 2 days ago. The child is currently under medical supervision and was not physically harmed." Imani nodded as she looked around the room. Her gaze fell on a vase of red roses standing on the nightstand. "What about a motive?" The officer checked his notes. According to witnesses, Abernathy accused his wife of infidelity. He believed that the child was not his, but his best friend's, a certain Lamont Thompson. Apparently, this bouquet of roses was the trigger. He decided that the flowers were from Thompson. Imani looked thoughtfully at the bouquet. 12 large red roses. An expensive bouquet. "Are the roses really from Thompson?" "Yes, he has already confirmed this. He says he just wanted to congratulate the couple on the birth of their child." "An interesting choice of flowers for a congratulation," Imani remarked. "Usually people give something more neutral." She walked over to the nightstand and examined the bouquet closely, without touching it. There was no card. "Contact the flower shops in town," she ordered. "Find out who ordered these roses and what instructions they gave." The officer nodded and made a note in his notebook. "What about the weapon?" "A .38 caliber revolver, registered to Joseph Abernathy, the suspect's father. Terrell Abernathy claims he carried it for self-defense when he was coming home late from work." Imani snorted. "And he brought it with him to the hospital? That's a weird choice for visiting his wife and newborn baby." She walked around the room again, carefully examining every detail. On the bedside table, next to a vase of roses, lay a cell phone, obviously Nyla's. Imani put on latex gloves and picked it up. "Was the victim's phone seized as evidence?" "Yes, but we haven't had time to check it yet." Imani put the phone back. She would deal with it later. "I need all the phone records between the victim, the suspect, and Lamont Thompson for the last 3 months. And I want to talk to the nurse, Yasmin Kadiri. She saw everything with her own eyes." Yasmin was found in the staff break room, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but already changed into a clean uniform. When she saw Imani, she tried to smile, but it came out forced. "Detective Ochieng, I was told you wanted to talk to me." "Yes." Imani sat down next to her. "You witnessed a murder. Tell me what happened, everything you saw and heard." Yasmin took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've known Nyla since school. We weren't close friends, but you know how it is in small towns. Everyone knows everyone. I knew Terrell too. I saw them together. They seemed like a normal couple, although lately there had been tension between them." "What kind of tension?" Yasmin shrugged. "It's hard to say. It's just the atmosphere between them wasn't the same as before. Terrell became more withdrawn, irritable. Nyla often looked anxious in his presence." "Do you think he was capable of violence?" "I don't know," Yasmin replied honestly. "I never saw him raise his hand to her, but he had a temper. He was quick to anger." Imani nodded, making notes in her notebook. What happened yesterday? I was finishing my shift and promised to bring Nyla some of her personal belongings, Yasmin began. I met Terrell at the entrance. He was going to visit his wife. He seemed normal, a little nervous, but that's understandable. Becoming a father and all that. He had flowers, lilies, I think, and a toy for the baby. Yasmin paused, remembering. We went up to the second floor together, but then I went to the doctor's office to get Nyla's things. When I returned to the ward, I heard shouting. Terrell was yelling something about roses and Lamont. Nyla was crying. The baby was crying too. I went in and saw Terrell holding the phone and shouting into it, obviously talking to Lamont. He was accusing them of having an affair, saying the baby wasn't his. And then what? Yasmin's eyes filled with tears. I tried to calm him down. I said I would call security if he didn't stop. He ignored me and continued to yell at Nyla. Then I saw that he had a gun. I rushed to the door to call for help, and at that moment, a shot rang out. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I couldn't save her. We tried, but the wound was too serious. She lost a lot of blood. She died on the operating table. Imani gave her time to calm down, then asked gently, Yasmin, do you know anything about the relationship between Nyla and Lamont Thompson? The nurse looked up at her with reddened eyes. What do you mean? Was there any connection between them? What Terrell said, could it be true? Yasmin hesitated, then slowly nodded. I'm not sure. It's just a feeling. But once I saw Nyla talking to Lamont in a cafe. It was about 5 months ago. They were sitting at a table in the corner and it looked intimate. When I went over to say hello, they both seemed very embarrassed, almost guilty. Anything else? Nyla never talked about him, but sometimes, when Lamont's name was mentioned, she changed. Her gaze would become distant, or she would start fiddling with the hem of her shirt, a nervous gesture, you know. What about the roses? Imani asked. Do you know what they meant? Yasmin shook her head. I didn't see who brought them. They were already in the room when I came on duty. But I remember how Nyla looked at them, with a mixture of joy and fear. Thank you, Yasmin. Imani closed her notebook. You've been very helpful. If you remember anything else, please contact me. The next item on the agenda was Terrell Abernathy. Imani found him in the holding cell, gaunt, with a vacant stare, dressed in a prison uniform. Mr. Abernathy, she began, sitting down across from him. I want to ask you a few questions. Terrell nodded silently. Yesterday, you confessed to shooting your wife, Imani said. Today, I'm giving you a chance to tell your side of the story in more detail. Terrell looked up at her wearily. What is there to tell? I killed her. It's simple. Not so simple, Imani objected. You accused her of infidelity. On what basis? Terrell smiled bitterly. You know, when you live with someone, you start to sense things about them. Every change in their behavior, in their mood. Nyla changed a few months ago. She became distant, pensive. She would often sit on her phone with a smile, but when I asked her who she was texting, she said she was just looking at photos or reading the news. He ran his hand over his face, as if wiping away an invisible web. Then I started noticing how she looked at Lamont when she thought I wasn't looking, and how he looked at her. There was something between them. I could feel it. But you didn't have any concrete evidence. I had suspicions, Terrell said stubbornly. And then those damn roses. Red roses. 12 of them. Do you know how much they cost? Lamont isn't the type to spend that kind of money on a simple greeting. What's so special about red roses? Imani asked, remembering Yasmin's words about Nyla's strange reaction to the flowers. Terrell thought for a moment, then slowly said, A year ago, I saw them together in the park. I was driving by and saw them on a bench. Lamont was saying something to Nyla and she was laughing. She was holding a red rose. When I asked her later what they had been talking about, Nyla said she had bumped into him on her way back from the store. The rose, she said, was from a street vendor who was giving them away for free as part of some promotional campaign. And you believed her? At the time, yes. But then, when I saw those roses in the hospital room, it was like a slap in the face. It was as if they were laughing at me. Imani studied his face intently. You say you killed your wife, but you don't admit that you planned it in advance. Why did you take a gun with you when you went to the hospital? Terrell looked surprised. I always carry it with me. We don't live in the best neighborhood and I work late. It's a habit. And you weren't going to use it against your wife? No, Terrell exclaimed. I just lost control. When I saw the roses, when she started lying, when Lamont called, something just snapped in my head. Imani made a note in her notebook. Murder in the heat of passion offered the chance of a more lenient sentence, but she needed to get to the bottom of the truth. What can you tell me about your son? Terrell looked down. Is he even my son? We'll do a paternity test, Imani said. But I'm asking about your feelings toward the child, regardless of the test results. Terrell was silent for a long time, then said, I wanted to be a good father, better than my own. But now it doesn't matter anymore. The interrogation was over, and Imani returned to the station to analyze the information she had gathered. The phone records were already waiting for her on her desk. As she looked through them, she frowned. Over the past 3 months, there had been over 100 calls and text messages between Nyla and Lamont. Many were late at night or early in the morning, when Terrell was most likely at work. This was unusual for just friends. Imani also examined Nyla's phone. Most of the messages between her and Lamont had been deleted, but some remained. They were careful in their wording, with no explicit declarations of love or mentions of a relationship, but the tone was intimate, full of innuendo that only the two of them could understand. I remember our conversation yesterday. I miss you, Lamont wrote. Me too. When can we see each other? Nyla replied. There was also a series of messages from Lamont sent the day before the birth. How are you feeling? I'm worried about you. I wish I could be there. And the last one, sent on the day of the birth. Congratulations on your son. I'll send you a special gift. A special gift. Red roses. Imani leaned back in her chair, thinking about the situation. The picture was becoming clearer, but to complete it, she needed Lamont Thompson's testimony. Lamont agreed to come to the station for a chat. He looked exhausted, his eyes red as if he hadn't slept all night. When Imani offered him a seat, he sank into a chair with a heavy sigh. Mr. Thompson, Imani began, I'm investigating the murder of Nyla Abernathy. You were a friend of the family, so your testimony is very important to us. Lamont nodded, looking somewhere past her. I'll do everything I can to help. Okay, Imani opened her notebook. First, tell me about your relationship with Terrell and Nyla. Terrell and I have been friends since childhood, Lamont began. We grew up together. We worked together on construction sites. He's always been like a brother to me. Nyla was his wife. I've known her for about 4 years since they started dating. And what was your relationship with Nyla like? Lamont shifted in his chair. Normal. Friendly. Just friendly? Imani raised an eyebrow. Mr. Thompson, we have records of your phone calls. Over 100 in the last 3 months. Many late at night. That doesn't sound like a normal friendship. Lamont paled. I don't... And then there are these messages. Imani placed the printouts in front of him. I miss you. I wish I could be there with you. And the most interesting one, I'll send you a special gift. Red roses, I presume? Lamont lowered his head, clenching his hands into fists. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, Imani suggested. Because right now, it looks like Terrell was right. You had an affair with his wife. There was a long pause. Finally, Lamont raised his head, and Imani saw tears in his eyes. Yes, he said quietly. We loved each other. How long ago did it start? About a year ago, Lamont said quietly but firmly. We didn't plan it. It just happened. I know I betrayed my friend. I know I did a despicable thing, but I loved her, and she loved me. Why didn't she leave her husband? She wanted to, Lamont replied. We planned to be together, but then she found out she was pregnant. And the baby? Lamont looked her straight in the eye. It was mine. We both knew it. Terrell. They had problems in that area. They had been trying to have a baby for 2 years, but nothing worked. The doctor said that Terrell had a low chance of conceiving a child naturally. And Nyla decided to stay with her husband despite that? She panicked, Lamont explained. She was afraid of Terrell's reaction, afraid he would guess. She decided it was better to keep the family together, to give the child a father. I was against it, but I respected her decision. I hoped that over time she would change her mind. And the roses? Imani asked. What did they mean? Lamont smiled sadly. The first time we realized how we felt about each other, I bought her a red rose. It became our symbol. When I found out about the birth of my son, I wanted to give her a gift. Silly, I know, but I didn't think Terrell would understand the meaning. But he did, Imani remarked. Yes. Lamont ran his hand over his face. And it cost Nyla her life. If only I had known. Back at the station, Imani filed a request for a DNA test to officially establish the child's paternity. But deep down, she already knew the result. Everything fit together. The affair between Nyla and Lamont, Terrell's problems with conception, the secret meetings and phone calls. 2 days later, the test results came back. As expected, Lamont Thompson was the biological father of the newborn. Imani filed the document and headed for the final interrogation of Terrell Abernathy. He was sitting in the same cell, in the same position, as if he hadn't moved since their last meeting. Mr. Abernathy, Imani said as she entered, I have new information about your case. Terrell looked up at her wearily. I admit to the murder charges, he said in a lifeless voice. No more interrogations. I admit my guilt. That's not why I'm here, Imani replied. I want you to know the truth. She placed a folder with DNA test results and printouts of phone calls in front of him. Your suspicions were correct. Nyla and Lamont did have an affair. The child is indeed his. Terrell stared at those documents for a long time without touching them. Then he nodded slowly. I knew it, he whispered. I always knew, deep down inside. I just didn't want to admit it. Lamont confirmed that red roses were their symbol, Imani continued. He gave her the first bouquet when they realized their feelings for each other. The roses at the hospital were a sign from him. Congratulations on the birth of his son. Terrell closed his eyes as if in pain. And Nyla? How did she feel about me? Imani hesitated. Should she tell him the truth or try to soften the blow? But this man had already done the irreparable. He deserved to know exactly what he had taken away. According to Lamont, she was going to leave you when she found out she was pregnant. But she was afraid of your reaction and decided to keep the family together, to give the child a father. Out of pity, Terrell said bitterly. She stayed with me out of pity. Perhaps, Imani said softly. Or out of a sense of duty. Or because she still cared about you, even if not in the same way as before. Terrell shook his head. It doesn't matter now, does it? I killed her. Because of my stupid jealousy. Because of my anger. Killed the mother of the child he considered his son. Mr. Abernathy, I must formally inform you that you are under arrest on charges of first-degree murder, Imani said. The weapon has been found. Your fingerprints are on it. There is a witness to the crime, and you yourself have confessed to the deed. Considering all the circumstances, the prosecutor may consider reclassifying the charge to second-degree murder if you cooperate. Terrell shrugged indifferently. What difference does it make? 25 years or life? I've lost everything anyway. Imani gathered her papers and stood up, ready to leave. But Terrell stopped her with a question. What will happen to the child? He will be placed in the care of social services, Imani replied. Perhaps Nyla's relatives will want to take him in. What about Lamont? Terrell asked. He's the father. That will be decided by the court, Imani said. But yes, as the biological father, he has the right to claim custody. Terrell nodded, as if this information brought him some relief. Okay, he said. Let the child be with his father. His real father. Leaving the cell, Imani headed to her office to finish the case report. Another murder, another tragedy, another family destroyed, And all because of a bouquet of red roses, which became a symbol of secret love and a catalyst for jealousy that led to death. The case had been solved, the culprit found and confessed. But Imani did not feel the satisfaction that usually came with the completion of an investigation. Only the bitterness of realizing that in this story, there were no right or wrong people, only people who made mistakes and paid too high a price for them.